meeting. Welcome everybody. For me, it's starting to feel like spring, getting past April snow showers. I'm ready to move on. So we want to do a roll call here. Annalise, are you in?
Present.
Tammy Stephenson.
Present.
Ken.
Present.
And Tom Hansel is present. We have 4 members present here this morning. Wendy, any public testimony this morning?
Not to my knowledge. No one's contacted me, so.
Surprise, surprise. It just must be a sign we're doing such good work. You know, we're not drawing controversy. You know, Bill Owen, on the other hand, you know, you need to watch him on the soccer field, you know, those rough calls he makes.
So true. I do have a quick question for the board. We have a landowner meeting tentatively scheduled for July 21st. I believe that is a Tuesday night. Let me double check. Yeah, or Tuesday. And so I didn't know whether you wanted to schedule that for a daytime meeting or an evening meeting.
So in the past, we've done afternoons, and I must say we have very poor attendance. What, Ken or Tanny or Annalise, I mean, you have a preference? I'm open to either time.
It's really about, I think, you know, I'm not familiar with your landowners, so if they're mostly businesses, then I would suggest doing it during the day. If they're mostly residential people, then I would suggest doing it at night to maximize participation.
I would tend to agree. And I would say probably afternoon or later afternoon might work best.
Yeah, I agree for the late afternoon. I think SDIC is mostly business, but it does allow for, you know, residential landowners to maybe log in a little easier, I think, in the late afternoon time slot.
Does that mean 4 p.m.? What does late afternoon mean?
I'd say 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Wendy, would you like me to secure a room?
Oh, would you like to do, that's another good question. Would you like to do this in person, or other landowner meetings have been on Zoom this year?
And I think we're required to do Zoom anyway, so we would need to ensure that we can do both. But that's a fun idea. It'd be nice to hang out with you all.
We do have the capacity to do in-person and virtual at the MCDD office. So if you chose to do that, we could accommodate you there outside your district.
Yeah. Well,
is that okay to do?
I
know
too. We're a little backwards there, but we're not that far back. We've got a little technology there. We can.
It seems like it might, if we're going to do it in person, it might be nice to do it in the district.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Just a thought.
Why don't we take that guidance and Tanny, well, what do you think, Wendy? I think let's mix it up. Let's try something different. That'd be I'm not on the board. I should be quiet.
You should be. Well, we still have some time for the notice. So if you'd like to discuss it again next month, well, I'm not sure when is, no, that might be, no, that'll still give us time. But it is a format meeting, so we won't have a lot of time for individual discussion. So
I'd like that idea, Tanny, because then I can go try out those new food carts that Troutdale has.
Yes, you can.
Wendy, I can bring, the county we utilize Meeting Owls, so it can be, you know, the room could be broadcast on the Meeting Owl. If that,
I don't know if that is fun.
Yeah, it's a camera that has 360 visibility, and when a person talks, it focuses on that individual.
Awesome.
It's a pretty dynamic little tool. I could bring that. If Tammy, you're thinking about the community room maybe in Troutdale?
I am.
Yeah. So that would just go on the table, and anybody who comes into the meeting remotely would see the entire room. So
Yeah, I just want to coordinate with one of you as like a liaison there to make sure all the logistical questions, it'll be a little extra additional work and have questions about, yeah, internet and all those good things, and my own setup for taking minutes. So it will be a little bit harder for staff, but I think you don't have a lot of landowners, so that won't be as hard because we're sort of also juggling those issues of being in a quorum. So I'm sure we've done it in the past and we can do it again.
Kenny, do you want to see if that room is available? And then
Yeah.
we can, if it isn't, that makes it easy. And if it is, then we can start to work through whether the logistics are feasible or not.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks for that
Annie,
conversation.
Tanny, we've also used the ODOT facility out at the airport too. It's another option.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking from a technology standpoint and everything, it'd be easier to use the county building.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Ben, you ready to talk to us about budget?
I am. It will just take me one moment to share my screen. And it's a really easy conversation for me. The board requested that we change, and you're seeing my PDF right here, is that right? Okay, just want to make sure. The board requested that we change our assessment to a 3% increase over the prior year. And that's what we've done. You'll see here we have the original proposed budget was a 9% increase. And here's the board's direction, the revised proposed budget at a 3% increase. And you can see the 3% right here. And the only other change that we've implemented is just the reserve balances to reflect that revenue change. All other things are constant. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ben, I just wanted to bring back up. The budget is predicated on us receiving grant funds from the state, correct?
That is correct. That is located in this line item, other revenue.
So, and then there's corresponding expenditure, I assume, with that.
That's correct. And if you recall, if for any reason we hear from the state that we will not receive that revenue, we would come back to the board at that moment with contingency plans.
I think the other point I'd mention is that the board will need to approve the grant agreement prior to entering into that agreement. So we know that's important to you all, and wanted to remind you of your authorities there.
Yeah,
Thank you both. Question or comments for Ben?
Appreciate your time today.
While we're on the topic of revenue, it's not directly revenue related, but I think, you know, we're in the president's proposed budget for the Corps' portion of the pre-construction engineering design costs, and we are included in both the Senate and House WRDA authorization bills. We have to get the authorizations before we can seek the additional appropriations for construction, but all those things are lining up well so far. Still risk. I'm not saying we have the money yet. We do not, but all the stars are so far remaining aligned.
Okay, no questions for Ben. Are we ready to move on to item C? No, excuse me, item D, the capital improvement plan. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you for the welcome and good morning all. In your packet today, looks like starting on page 4 is actually page 3 with the board summary page. is your draft capital improvement plan for the next 5-year window, and a glance at years 6 through 10 based on staff's information about needs out in your district. So I will presume you've glanced at it, so I will just do a very high-level overview of the plan. You have seen this information last month in Ben's presentation of the annual budget. This just provides you a longer-term view of what capital needs exist out in your area. So I'm starting on page 4, and I can share this. Does everyone have a copy of the CIP, or would you like me to share it? Okay, I get a thumbs up. All right, good. You will, for those who have been through this process before, the format will look very similar to what you've seen previously. This year, we're looking at just approximately $586,000 investments for capital needs in this coming fiscal year, and within the 5-year total, we're looking at $1.6 million. And I get into a description of what those investments entail further into the documents. We have our standard introduction section, which is boilerplate for y'all. There's an overview of the CIP developments that has not changed. We still are using our primary infrastructure criteria, CIP criteria, which is noted in step 2. And then we end up making some smaller adjustments to those rankings and those scores based on some additional value added criteria that are listed in step 3 that range from community benefit, equity, environment, workplace benefits, so on and so forth. We do recognize that some characteristics of a project have a more acute nature that need to be addressed. So items really regarding regulatory compliance or partner financial supports indicate that the project is moved to the top of the priority list. The next section is a new section that I wanted to spend just a moment or two of time with y'all, and it involves cost estimates. And so many of you have been in your own respective businesses and can appreciate that cost estimates for any project can change over time depending on project maturity. And this section, which is just over a page long, represents our interpretation of how costs or estimates are applied here. And it follows similar guidance that the Advancement of Cost Engineering as well as the Army Corps of Engineers uses. So it's grounded in national approaches to cost estimation. But I wanted to add that component to our CIP this year so you all can appreciate what you normally just see a single number, of course, associated with the project, and depending on the maturity of that project, those cost estimates can be pretty varied, right? So if it's in a planning phase, just after a planning phase, cost estimates can be plus or minus 100%. But if you're at construction bids, you just finished construction bids, those costs should be pretty tight, right? So you're looking at plus or minus 5–10% or so. So I wanted to give not only this board, but other readers of the documents some idea of what are associated with each of the cost estimates. We just finished the drainage master plan with the city also recently, but you'll note in this table, in table 1 on page, it looks like it's page 6 of your packets, page 3 of the document. Those master plan costs are pretty early. They are done through some preliminary analysis and engineering, but the type of information you place for cost estimates there are are based upon, typical averages, or maybe the group that's doing the cost estimates have done a recent job that's similar. So they'll use that type of information rather than project specific information. So the result is a cost estimate, but a pretty broad range of possible variation of what the final cost could be. And then, so that's a class 5 type of cost estimate. And what my goal is, and may not be achievable this year, my goal is to bring you class 3 estimates for those projects that you are seeing for budget authorization for the coming year. So in those cases, the cost estimate range is tighter, plus 30 minus 20% or so. And so to do that, there's additional work that has to be done in order to get a better handle on the final design and construction costs associated with that project. I'll highlight the gravity flow pipes that just happened recently. And we'll talk a little more about that here. That is a project, is a perfect project to highlight, to say that some preliminary engineering needs to be done to have a really good handle on the scope that has to be designed as needed, and then a construction cost estimate can put together. But to do that, you have to invest in a project to a tune of maybe 50,000, maybe more, depending on the complexity of the project. But the outcome is that you are able to have some more confidence that the number that we're offering you as staff to complete the final design and construction is project specific, right? And so it provides some more details. And so when we come back to you the following year and say, look, this is what we found, and it's going to cost $100,000 to finish design, another $500,000 to do construction, you have some confidence to say, look, the staff has done some due diligence and done some preliminary work here, more than just a planning level work, and you can have some confidence that this type of number is helpful for you or the new urban district to help set rates moving forward. And so, but it's also a perfect time, like the gravity flow project, to say, look, this may not be the right project for us right now. And that's what happened with that project. So that 30% milestone is pretty helpful for a number of reasons, and budget authorization is one of them. I'll note that the Corps' feasibility study was pretty involved, right? It was $3 million worth of really planning and preliminary design. They haven't even gotten into final design yet. So it was a large sum of money just to get to 30%. But the outcome is that they have a pretty good handle on costs based on the information they've collected today. Will it change? It will, because there's not all the information, not all the uncertainties that they've identified have been run to ground. So, but it's a pretty good estimate based on what they know about the market and what the site entails. So my intention again here is to make sure that in the future that at least for the next year's budgets for capital outlay, that we get to these class 3 estimates. The next section.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
Just a question. So
Yep.
We're seeing a lot of inflationary pressures right now. How do those play out with this work? Is it going to be exposed to these, incredibly high increases we're seeing? Is the drainage work subject to those increases?
Yeah, they sure are. Just like many other public works projects, it's just transportation materials to the sites, actually the manufacture of materials, some of the pipe work, particularly a plastic pipe, uses a lot of oil. Labor, of course, with the labor pressures to retain staff and draw more staff, that the construction industry is not immune to those. So all of those factor into it. You'll see towards the end of the plan that we've assumed a 7% increase, not only for next year, but for the following 5 years. And that's an assumption based on what we've researched a little bit on our end. I'll note that the years 6 through 10 escalation numbers come back down to a 4% level, which is closer to a long-term increase that we've seen over time. But yeah, I hope that answers that question.
No, it's very pertinent with, at this cycle of, budgeting, our capital, really not too much going on next year, more design work. Thank you. I really appreciate the update.
Yep, you're welcome. And you should also be confident that the Corps of Engineers staff incorporated escalation in their estimates too. So they were sensitive about that.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, is like, if a project's listed in 2025 for construction, is that listed in 2025 numbers?
It is, with those escalation numbers incorporated.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess it's 2020 numbers escalated to 2025.
Okay, when they're estimated, what we've been doing on some of our projects is we've been estimating it based on the year that it's constructed. So there's an escalator for each year, anticipating the X number of amount of inflation. So then you get to what the future value of $1 is in 2025. So it's $1, it's $1 today, but it's worth $1.20 when you build it.
You're right.
So that's what we've been trying to do. And so I think you're probably getting at the same thing. What you want to know is it what are the costs in 2025? Are they escalated based on traditional way to escalate projects? So
yeah, and I'm happy to hear how other organizations do their own escalation, with the processes to identify what those numbers are. So if you all have any suggestions of who we can reach out to, I'm more than open to hearing those and learning from their experience too. So if you have any of those suggestions, you're certainly welcome to email them to me, or you can let me know now.
Our goal would be to have projects come in under budget. So even if we have to take a little pain at the beginning. So
right. Yeah, let me backtrack on the 2020, my last comment there. The numbers you see in the CIP represent the escalated numbers. So the $2025 needs represent $2025. So we're accommodating for what costs we need to generate for revenue over time accordingly. Page 4 of the CIP provides an overview of what the 5-year plan entails. Know that we're embarking on a design phase to replace the SCADA hardware at all of our pump stations throughout all 4 of the special districts. There's only one site at an SDIC, so the costs are less here than in some other districts. We have also have designed and built one vehicle gates that we use as an access point in MCDD. So we're going to install it this year, learn from what we've done there, and then apply those observations to design for similar access points in SDIC and other locations. So yeah, this design, you should see I don't think I have a photo in here, but the new gate is pretty robust. It's something you might see out in the Forest Service gates out in really rural parts of the states. So it's going to take some effort to get this one down. But people are creative, so I hope it will slow most people down to get around it. And finally, as you well know, the PMLS, Portland Metro Levy System suite of projects is starting hopefully this next fiscal year. We've already had a reference about outside funding that Ben talked about during his updates, and those are noted in the CIP as well. The gravity flow station and pipes projects has been stopped and 30% design, but we did finish up the required pipe inspection as well. So that was helpful. Depending on what happens with the Columbia River Treaty, we may or may not go forward with that project. If the water levels are more consistently higher than what we've seen in past, this gravity flow system may just be completely moot because gravity may not be able to push water from Salmon Creek into the river. It would go the opposite way. So we definitely don't want to open up the gates when that happens. And then of course the big the driver for the CIP, 5-year CIP, is the PMLS projects. It's the 5-year overall total is bigger because there's more construction anticipated in that 5-year window than last year when we were looking at this. So it went up significantly because of that. Yeah, so and then Appendix A represents the an overview of what we're looking at. You'll see that the appendix is a little bit different than last year's. I added a column for cost accuracy, like we've just talked about. I've added another informational point here about external funding, which projects are associated with external funding and which are not. I also added another column to give you an idea of comparison of what was budgeted versus what we estimate we would spend for this current fiscal year, and the rest of the information is the same. Appendix B shows individual projects, includes individual project summaries for each of the ones that are in the 5-year CIP. I did not include any that are in the 10-year CIP as consistent with previous years. So that's an overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Bill?
Sure. Good morning, Bill.
Morning.
I had a couple questions. One, we shot the gravity flow and put it out of its misery, right?
We have temporarily shot it and put it out of its misery. That is correct.
So that would represent a reduction in the total amount?
Of the 5-year amount, that is correct.
Okay. Because it looks like it actually the total went up.
The 5-year CIP did go up, and while the gravity flow project did decrease the budget by 83,000, the PMLS projects increased by over 3.6 million. So
Right.
it's covered within the two.
Okay, I was just looking at the one, the line at the end, 23 to 32,
Okay.
and it's 1.16 in there, and last year's it was like 1,014,000.
1.16. Right. So escalation kicked in, and so the number would change because our assumption about the escalation changed from last year.
Okay. But we're not doing it, so we still have escalation?
We do, because right now I put a pin in it to return to this project in years 6 through 10. And so if you do the cost escalation over time, then the dollar amount increased as a result of that. This really, it's the 7% that we added the first couple of years that really made the difference. But Ben will have to chime in here, but my understanding is that while we show that number, that doesn't factor into the current rates calculations that he estimates over time. Those numbers in years 6 through 10 are primarily for board members to understand that there are future needs. Ben, can you elaborate at all?
Yeah, we focused our recommendations for rate increases over the next few years, understanding that we would ideally transition to the urban district and find new revenue sources for projects in outer years. However, having said that, looking at the project needs over the next couple of years, we recommended to all of the board, each of the districts, each of the boards to increase their rates by at least 9%. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how we approached that conversation. We didn't want to be overly cautious, but we wanted to be optimistic that we would eventually transition to the new district and have new revenue streams to accommodate those projects.
Okay, and PMLS, we're talking 3.6 million up.
Correct. That's what my math was. I'll double check that before the final version, but that's my understanding.
Do we have a breakdown of that? It's kind of a big chewy number.
So is there, so Appendix A provides some of that breakdown. Are you interested in another way to summarize that information?
Maybe by project.
So Colin is, I see on the attendee list here, and I wonder if he can comment on that. And we can potentially track that down before your next meeting.
Sure, and just a note, the work for PMLS for the coming year is for the pre-construction engineering design phase. So that is the engineering phase for all 4 districts. And so you're not going to be able to parse that by individual projects. I can definitely work with you to get individual information that we've presented in the past about what projects are being developed in SDIC, but a short rundown of that is the full replacement of the Sandy pump station, rebuilding the levee basically from the Sandy pump station all the way over to Sundial Road, and then a fix down in the southeast corner where the ODOT bike path mirrors Graham Road. So it can give you more information on those individual projects, but in the coming year, what is being addressed is overall design phase, so not parsed by project.
Okay. And since you're tuned in there, Colin, gate tower.
Yes, and Bill can supplement, but as those are Levy Ready Columbia projects, what is moving forward this current fiscal year and then into next fiscal year. This current fiscal year, we're completing feasibility analysis on really what to be done, what can be done with the gate tower. And then next year, we'll be moving forward, and this is funded through the Levy Ready Columbia process partially, the actual design phase of the remediation. So ideally getting to about 30% design by the end of next fiscal year.
And I read somewhere about that some of that's being funded by the partners and some of it's MCDD, some of it's SDIC. What's the breakdown of that? Do you know?
I don't have that right there, but Bill,
Okay.
do you have that available in your documentation? I can follow up with the board on that.
Yeah, let's follow up. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Anything else? Annalise or Ken? Bill, I noticed the dredging got dropped off the plan. Is all of a sudden, did it flush out and it cleared itself, or?
I assume that was tongue in cheek, but no, it did not. The reason why it's not in this particular document is because we don't own that Salmon Creek. And so it was a recognition for me that it doesn't belong in a capital summary. It is going to be an expensive endeavor. I still anticipate that some type of dredging will be needed in order for the existing pipe system to function properly. And that's because the sediment in Salmon Creek has accumulated over time, that it's blocked at least half of the outlet on the or the opening on the SDIC side. I don't know the condition of the pipe on the sediment levels on the MCD side quite yet. That's partly what the LRC work is going to be doing to get to that 30% design phase. So the project doesn't go away. It did get dropped in the capital document CIP for those reasons, though.
So it's not on the 10-year horizon.
It is in the 10-year horizon as an operating project, but not as a capital project.
Okay.
Because we don't own or control the creek like that.
Yep. And thank you for the update on the cost accuracy. I think that's a nice addition to the table. Under the Army Corps PLMS projects, it's got the Sandy pump station replacement, but under external funding, it says none. I'm assuming, I thought that was the federal share, and our local match was down below. Help me understand that.
Right. So what I want to do is make sure that it still included the capital improvements that the drainage master plan identified. The Sandy pump station replacement was one of them. In parallel with that, of course, you know, the PLMLS projects went through and ultimately concluded that that pump station needed to be replaced. I feel that that pump station needs to be replaced, you know, ideally starting in 2027. And if for some reason the PMLS suite of projects don't move forward, that capital need still exists. And so if the funding for the PMLS goes sideways and they aren't able to do that, my recommendation is that the special districts look for funding opportunities to replace that pump station. So this was my way of making sure that that needs was highlighted. But what I did is put a little footnote there in Appendix A to indicate that if the PMLS projects move forward as anticipated, that particular projects and a couple of others would drop off the list. So we have a situation, let me one more thing. We have a situation in MCDD where we needed a capital improvement at pump station 4 to replace the trash rake system. And the need was so critical that we want to spend our own money to make those upgrades now, even though the PMLS projects identified that same need. And so because we're moving forward with that project, we're going to get a credit from the Corps of Engineers for doing that work ahead of time. So I don't anticipate that happening in SDIC, but if the schedule changes and what we're anticipating, I want to make sure that we're prepared to get that type of credit if we end up moving forward before they do.
So just from the optics standpoint, I'm a little concerned that we're willing to spend $18 million without any external funding. That's what the message says right now. And I'm not sure if that's the message I'm comfortable with. Because we're little SDIC, and $18 million pump station is a big commitment. And that translates to a big rate increase. So putting it out there that we're going to build it in a 10-year horizon without external funding, I'm just a little nervous about what that financial obligation is. And again, this is predicated on SDIC's existence. The urban they have a different funding vehicle in mind. So I'm just nervous about putting it out that it's in our plan that we're going to build an $18 million pump station, regardless if we get external funding or not. Just my personal feeling. Tanny or Ken or Annalisa, if you can help me with my concern, or if you don't have a concern, let me know. But I don't, when I first came on the board, this was like a $5 million pump station, and now we're at 18 million. So it's just, it's growing.
Well, it does have the rooftop bar and water slide and things too. So that did up the cost.
It's really the affordable housing that's driving the costs up.
I would agree with you, Tom. I'm just wondering if, somehow we can do some caveat that it's, funded through other sources or something. I don't know.
And I think the truth is, if we don't get the federal funds, it's a big problem, right? And it's not just a big problem for SDIC. It's a big problem for all the districts. So maybe there's a more robust footnote or an asterisk or something. At the same time, that pump station is in desperate need of improvement to protect the landowners in the district. So
I wonder if you just add to that.
That's the tension.
I wonder if you just add to that footnote that's already there, because it says that footnote number 2, additional funding are as described below.
Yeah, I can add an item C, a CAT, to say staff will aggressively go after grants and other external funding options if the timing for this replacement requires non-PMLS support or some version of that, if that would help.
I'm not convinced we're going to build like for like. If there's no federal dollar supporting our work, would our design change? I don't know. I'm just questioning. When you get federal dollars involved, sometimes you design a little different. If it's local, it might be a little scale. It might be scaled back because this is a Army Corps project. But if it's not an Army Corps project, what do we build to protect the properties? So
right. So you're absolutely correct, Tom, and that number that we have in there for the same pump station replacement reflects what's in the drainage master plan or an escalated version of that. So it's a local design as opposed to the core design. So that part is in there. But you're right. I mean, the design could change depending on the drivers.
Annalise, did you have something to contribute?
Well, I guess I would just say that number is pretty far out in terms of years. So I am not too concerned about today or this year saying this is what we hope will happen. This is what, the other alternative funding mechanisms we're going to be looking into. That number I anticipate will change actually between now and 2028. So I I don't have a problem with saying like, in this moment right now, this is what we're thinking, this is what we're hoping is going to happen. And you know what? My guess is probably in 2027, it might look different, and that's okay.
Thank you all. So Bill, are you comfortable with maybe adding a footnote just to soften that? I mean, that's going to be a challenge for the district to come up with an $18 million financing package. So
I am completely comfortable of adding that footnote to do so. If it helps at all, we are optimistic that we'll be successful in getting a FEMA grant to help pay for 75% of the design costs to replace the PIR pump station in Penn 1. And so with the city's help, that looks, crossing our fingers, it looks like we positioned ourselves well for that cost. And it's the full construction there is 14 million. And so it looks like we're on the right path. So we'll have some experience and hopefully some success in going after grants if and when we need to do something for that particular pump station. But I am, that was a long answer to say, yes, I'm comfortable of adding a footnote to acknowledge those, the need for external funding.
And this just comes at the same time as we're trying to stand up a new government to take on these capital challenges. And it puts us in a difficult place to kind of be planning for a time that we won't be in existence. So
Okay.
at the same time, I'm feeling like we're leaving a big liability to the urban to stand up. So
Yep, that technically that's true, but you have a plan to address that liability, and that's the PMLS work right now. The other, I'll note that the other, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 items below that Sandy pump station replacement line in Appendix A all relate to that same project. So the external funding footnote will be the same for all of those.
Bill, I had you run long here. I'm sorry, but thank you for answering our questions.
Tom,
Go ahead,
I
Danny.
want to loop back around to one comment that you made on the dredging. I understand it's property that we don't own. I'm just concerned about us having the funding in place to do that work if it's not in the CIP somehow.
Yeah, I know Ben and I have talked about this project. I know, Ben, can you comment at all about how we handle these operating projects from your vantage point?
You might have to refresh my memory, Bill.
Yeah, that's okay.
I can talk about the theory of operating versus capital, but yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so there was a particular project that was referenced here that has been in the CIP in past, and that's the Salmon Creek dredging work. It's connected with a capital project that is legitimately in here, but I've removed it this year, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that dredging work because of a variety of factors. How do you handle things like that for the next, because it's possible we may have to do that within 2-3 years from now?
Yeah, so we can handle that a couple different ways. If it's removed from the CIP and it ends up in being an operational maintenance item, then we could include that in the operating budget in future years. Alternatively, that could, depending on the urgency of that project, we could delay that project to a later date when we have a different revenue streams. If it needs to come back into the capital portfolio at any point, then we would need to plan for that, and we would prioritize it as we prioritize any project.
There's also a possibility that we could lump that work into the gate tower and drainage pipe project itself. So because in order for any structural improvements to be made to those assets, the conditions on both sides of the pipe have to be adequate for it to function properly. So there's a chance we can make that tie and lump it into that larger project. So it looks like there's a couple of different ways to accommodate for this.
Absolutely. I've seen that many times in other jurisdictions where, you know, once you get into the design and engineering of a project and you understand what the right strategy is, if it makes sense to attach a project or a portion of a project to a different project that's scheduled down the line, then it will fall off the CIP and be attached to a different project like Bill was describing. So from my perspective, it's nothing out of the ordinary. And we can accommodate that through our strategy process when we look at the CIP in future years.
Did that answer your question, Tanny? Okay.
Thanks again, Bill and Ben.
Welcome. So just as a reminder, you'll see this a slightly modified version of this with that footnote and maybe a couple other tweaks, but for the most part, a very similar looking document at your June format meeting for final approval. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Moving on to item E, moving into executive session. ORS 192-660 subsection 2 subsection F to consider information records that are exempt from disclosure by law, including written advice from your attorney. So I think everybody that needs to be here is here, huh? Thanks, Hong.
Yeah, you're welcome. Wendy, can you stop the recording?
So I'm looking for a motion on our discussion from executive session.
I move to approve the staff recommendation for the item regarding the SDIC management letter as discussed in executive session under advice from legal counsel.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Tanny Stephenson,
Yes.
Annalise Kohler,
Yes.
Ken Anderton,
Yes.
Tom Hansel votes yes. Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Housekeeping.
Yes.
So Jim, your time to shine. Any new business you'd like to cover?
Nothing of immediate import, and I know at least one of you has another engagement in the next minute or two, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I guess the thing I would say is we're moving ahead with the pay equity study and working with the staff. We also have a few hires that we're in the midst of. So we have our Director of Finance and Administration position closes Friday, and I'll be working with Janet and Hong and others to pick the best candidate. And I think we're making good progress, slow but steady.
Ken, Tanny, Annalise, any business you'd like to bring up?
Tom, I don't know if you want to share, we did get a positive hint from Cheryl Norris that she may be interested in serving on your board, and we sent her a little bit of time. She wanted to know what the time commitment was and haven't heard back, but we're going gently there. And as Tom said, we don't want to coerce anybody into this. They have to want to do it.
Yeah,
but
I've sent her emails and a voice message and she hasn't responded. I know she took some time off, so maybe just bury
yeah,
her.
she wrote back after and said, yes, I'm interested. What's the time commitment? And I copied you on that email, Tom, in case she had additional questions. So.
Seeing no further action, I think we're clear to adjourn this May 17th meeting. Thank you all.
Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
support, everybody. Take care. Have a nice day. Enjoy the sunshine.
Take care, y'all.